right, welcome back to the Content That Grows podcast. Feels like it's been a second. We've had two guest podcast episodes back to back, so glad to be back on. How's it going, Nate?
I'm doing well, Derek. How are you?
Doing well, making my way through summer, coming off a little bit of a vacation and trying to remember what my job is. But feeling fresh. Okay, so this week, wanted to cover a topic that I feel like throughout my time here and as an SEO practitioner over the last few years, I've heard kind of the phrase or term SEO used interchangeably with organic growth and kind of encompassing the entirety of that. And then once you start doing this profession and you start specializing, you realize that you share like an important role, but kind of just a slice of what organic growth is overall at a company. And I think sometimes it makes it more visible to us, what we own. So I wanted to kind of throw a question over to you to start, which is like, what are some distinctions that you think of when you hear SEO versus when you hear the term organic growth?
I think that there's a couple of factors here. One is, the terminology in general is just it's going to be interpreted a lot of different ways. I was just talking to a startup CEO recently and was just kind of basically saying he was asking what job title do you use for a little bit more performance-based head of marketing, and I was like, well, you're going to have some people who put demand gen, some people who put acquisition, some people are going to put growth marketing, and you dive into any one of those and you're going to have a variety of skill sets. Maybe they were very heavily paid or whatever. So it's just, I think that kind of continues into here, where even if we talk about this and define it, you turn around and talk to another person, they may define it another way. And so I think that's just an unfortunate challenge within the world of startup marketing and some of the idiosyncrasies there. So with that, I think for me, organic growth is the larger umbrella, and SEO is probably the biggest component inside of that. But really, organic, I think, are just non-paid things. So I think brand, PR, social, kind of all fit into there. And obviously some of those things can have paid elements within them, but all sort of in the spirit of what are the things that we can continue to build that's just this brand and this universe of content and things that people will continue to know us by and learn about us and continue to come back and build trust and authority and all those things. And so if you've listened to any prior episodes, you've probably heard me say organic search is a distribution channel. It's not the only distribution channel. And so that's true in the context of creating content, which is probably more so what we've talked about, but also just in general, when you think about performance and hitting goals and what are you doing, you really can tell when you feel it happening, where you're just, you're getting referral traffic and things that people are just writing about you proactively and adding you on, 5 best whatever lists for their own blog. And there's social conversation, there's engagement on your own social content, you're getting mentioned in things, and, other brand mentions you're getting written about from a PR perspective, and just all those things I think really kind of just start to build up, and you're like, okay, this is not just SEO and people searching stuff in Google. This is something that's happening, consistently and is an organic, channel. So I think that's kind of how I would define it.
Yeah, it becomes very clear how vast organic growth is to me. Sort of as I introed this section, when I think of how SEO has been framed as a service,
Yeah.
and like the work that I can do to like help you as a company or client. So like
Yeah.
I know we can get web pages up on your website, and like we can do the content writing of that and creation of it. And then our whole goal is like maybe some like, well, and then including probably some like technical components to making sure everything's
Yeah.
working, right? And then there's this element that sort of comes into play where you're like, okay, SEO is really about getting this traffic onto your website. So we're helping you create content that like will hopefully resonate and like gets the right people on here.
Yep.
But pretty soon you're also like, okay, we want to move these people somewhere, or naturally there's like a CRO component
Yes.
within SEO, where all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, let's sit down with you and like let's figure out where we're going to like move these people to, and where you can offer more value. And then all of a sudden you start to see like, oh, we may be missing some of these other core organic growth components that are going to like make this whole thing work a little better, or like make your brand, as you mentioned, like more endearing, a little stickier, kind of more easy to remember, where it's not just about finding you via a search engine. It's all these other ways you can just give people more value, more content.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did. I think I spoke about that a bit more from like a channel perspective, but absolutely the CRO component and understanding how to move people through the funnel, and ultimately, I think that's where the word growth in there, I think, really kind of lends itself a bit more into like, funnel and revenue perspective versus something that I think maybe SEO has gotten a bit more of a reputation, or just in folks' minds, they sort of pair that with traffic, more than anything else. And so I think, you're absolutely right. The moving people through, engaging deeper with your company, and then ultimately elements of revenue, I think is a really big part of that, and kind of reminds me a bit too, just that episode we did talking about the difference between like SaaS SEO, versus whatever pure SEO or something like that, and that was similar. We're talking about balancing brand and product marketing and conversion, and some of the like core SEO elements, and how those all work together. So I think that very much fits in here too.
Absolutely. And even in our in our impact that we want to have, like 10-speed itself has evolved, right? Like, we're how we can support you. Like we've realized like, oh, we need to be probably a larger part of this organic growth ecosystem for companies in order to just make this service like a better experience for them, and for them to get out what they're really asking for at the end of the day, which is, to your point, like we all think of traffic. We know that's what SEO gets you, but if we're going to help you reach kind of the like flywheel and the pipeline goals with SQLs and things, like we're probably going to have to like help you expand the overall organic offering that you're providing.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's definitely been shifting, and so I think both in kind of the services we offer and the work that we're doing for companies, as well as how we're shifting the way we measure, to be much more, covering not just like here's rankings and traffic and how many keywords and, maybe signups, or even just only looking at organic revenue as in organic search revenue, but really, starting to think about awareness metrics and engagement metrics, and some of that really kind of helps paint that better picture of how the overall organic growth is expanding and evolving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe now to like take it from this abstraction, and move it into a more kind of tangible / tactical view of what we mean. Like I can even like, if we're talking about 10-speed in sort of our own organic growth engine. Obviously, we have like, a fairly modest paid approach that we're trialing, but in large part, it's this healthy mix of things. So, of course, we're doing SEO, and ranking for things that we really feel is important. We're bandwidth limited, so like impact, and then also just understanding our own company as an agency is slightly different than SaaS. So like how we need to resonate. So we know we need thought leadership, right? Like we need to build trust. And as we get people in and they start to get endeared, we're sort of like, oh, well, we should have a newsletter. We're focusing on building like individual employee brands. So we have kind of this like authority in social spaces, and people have access to us. And like we can distribute content on that, but we can also just be in those spaces, which is another just form of a way of organically distributing, but growing as well. Obviously, we've got this podcast. We're appearing on other people's podcasts, event speakerships, just going to events. We're going to Inbound here in the next month. And then coupling that with like, none of this is possible without having a clear target audience. We know we need like messaging and the website to kind of all be in place. And I think another core part of our own organic engine is just realizing like there's this sort of content people can like see and interact with. It's educational. And then for us as a company, we need trust factors. So we need people who generally like know more than you and Kevin and have worked with you, but like trust 10-Speed as a brand. So now we need case studies and these sort of testimonials and results-oriented content or pages. And all of that is part of the organic growth engine, as it is, to say like, yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. And I mentioned SEO at the very start of all that. It's sort of the center and the fuel source for most of our channels that I just mentioned. But as a team of 1.5 to 2, it's a lot of places to be. But now we're starting to see more consistent pipeline because we have that.
Yeah. And I think, well, first of all, quick plug. We moved our newsletter to Substack, so you can find that newsletter.10speed.io. It's called Optimized by 10speed. So definitely check that out and jump on the free subscription. It's great stuff. Still going out monthly, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's not going to overwhelm your inbox. Definitely check it out. Yes. I mean, I think, coming into it, and I think maybe we've talked about this a little bit before, like the bandwidth constraint is important, and I think that's something that a lot of people feel. I mean, even really big teams can feel that, but a lot of folks who are solo marketers or small teams, they really trying to figure out how to get the most bang for their buck. And so that's where for us it was like, well, we believe we can create content for our site. Some of it's more thought leadership oriented, some of it is more optimized for search. But then that allows us to, repurpose that and continue to distribute and adds to the newsletter. And then the podcast is another thing that we can do once and turn it into a number of things. And so really just trying to focus as much as possible on high leverage things. But again, that we also know are relevant to who we're trying to reach and what we're trying to do. And I think, when I look across the companies that aren't doing this, I think there's probably a pretty big delineation. And one is like they're very heavy on SEO content, but maybe aren't doing, like you look at that and you go, oh my gosh, you have this library of content. Your social team's over here doing a completely different thing, and they could be distributing so much of what you have. You could be, repurposing, repackaging. You don't have to keep, putting a bunch of new stuff out. And it's very, very, very focused on organic search, but they're not necessarily doing the other pieces. Or you have folks that are just like, we have a podcast, we do stuff on social, and, our blog is basically just recaps of podcast episodes, and they aren't having that intentional focus on the other side. I would say that's probably the biggest, area where we just see one or the other is happening, and missing that mark on really being able to think about it a bit more holistically, diversify where they're getting exposure, and getting reach and the impact of what they can have from their efforts. So I would say that's probably the biggest. And then obviously you can just kind of tell if you spend 5 minutes looking at a company, that like they've got some great thought leadership. They've got content that looks optimized for a specific topic. They're doing quite a bit on social, both across the brand profile as well as some of like individuals within the company. And they have podcasts and their YouTube channels growing and lively, and all these things that you could just tell like there's some intentionality in how things are being done, and pretty well rounded. So I think I've been happy with how we've approached so far. And again, we're an agency, not a SaaS company, so there's a little bit of nuance there, but it's never felt like we don't have marketing, even though we don't have like this huge marketing team or a huge budget. I think we've done a good job of maximizing that, and that's attributed to that feeling of organic growth. Like one thing can do multiple things for you, and just kind of build on that and compound.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that covered even a lot of the next section, so we can.
Yep.
I think if
we can kind of round it out if you want to.
Yeah.
Set it up.
I think when I'm thinking of, differentiators between the people who like say they're doing organic growth but aren't seeing results, and those that like say they're doing it and are really killing it, they're doing a great job. A lot of it comes down to these like, I'll call them intangibles, but they're just like a mix of an awareness and like skills and experience that all kind of come together. Sometimes you can see it in like their ability to, prioritize needs and gaps. So it's like, okay, we need to be creating content around this topic. Here's what we've got the bandwidth to do. Here's how we make that most effective. Here's when to worry about ROI. Do we need to be in SEO right now, or should we be building, this other type of content, which is like, do we need podcasts? Do we need case studies? Like, where's the leaky buckets? I think also it's like the ability to understand their silos. They're not segmenting. They're not leaving SEO on its own way out in the other thing, but they're also like not leaving their podcast in a random subfolder.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe the last thing I'll touch on is just kind of like, we've touched on this on multiple episodes, and it's sort of a thing that I grow into as like I gain more experience, but I know I've heard you and Kevin talk about it, which is just like leaning into your team's talents and desires is kind of also the secret unlock to organic growth, because a number of these channels do require a level of soft skill and charm and charisma and voice, that I think like if you're going to choose a channel and like really kill it there, then you've got to have people who are like excited about being good at that thing and excited about what they're creating enough to like make it a part of maybe even their own individual brands.
Yes. I think there's like two sides of the same coin, I guess, in my mind with that. Is like sometimes you have someone who either just sort of stumbles into something or just expresses interest in, and you can kind of let them run with it, with the right guidance that it fits. And I think the other side is that's a really big part of when you are hiring marketers, knowing, hey, this is what we know we need, and we need to go find someone to do that. So, for example, you do well on your personal profile on LinkedIn. You seem to enjoy it and do well, and you're consistent, and your following has grown, outpaced anything else for the company. And I think that's because it's not like a task on your to-do list. It's something that you enjoy. And so, if we were setting out, to hire someone, wanting them to do that, that's a huge thing to make sure that that's something that they want to do. And so I think you have, if there are certain activities that are critical to your strategy and you want from your team, then hiring a marketer that has that orientation, that desire, that passion, I think is the other side of that. So yeah, I think the silos thing you mentioned, and I mentioned it before, is like so critical. I mean, there are a lot of companies that still just build a social strategy over here and don't have any real connection to content team or what the content or organic growth strategy might be, and that's just such a huge miss. Like you're sitting here like racking your brain trying to come up with your social content calendar and what to do, and you've got this huge library of things that's helpful, meaningful to your audience, and like can really be done well. And and that's not just drop a link to the blog post, with the title, like just pull some of that content out of there, like we've talked about before, and really deliver the highlights of it and the meat of it in the social post for someone, and just add that value. But yeah, it spans across a lot of things, and I'm seeing more and more people do like they just start a podcast purely as an ABM play, like we're only going to have guests on from our industry and have that conversation. And the goal is to have some of them trickle through. And I think that's totally fine. Not really ever what our intention was, or how we approach it. But like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the biggest thing is like that alone starts to have the potential to be on an island. Like, no, we don't want to do anything else with that. Like, that's just for ABM, where versus like, how do you just slow down a little bit and just think a little more intentionally, and like, how can we do this in a way that it is for ABM, but then it also benefits more people, helps drive awareness, helps drive, boost up the other channels and do more there. So, those are the things, when we say silo, it's not about like team structure necessarily, but just sort of like how you think about channels and content formats and some of that stuff. So, yeah, I think there's a lot. And I would say, the quick advice I would give if you're kind of trying to think through this for your own company would be, if you feel like your tendency is, I have to go create more content, like we have to keep creating content, then I would encourage you to look at how much you're doing with everything that you already have, and what are some ways that if you had, like, you're kind of dependent on that. So like, what if you had a budget cut or something that all of a sudden you can only create half as much as you are currently? What would you do? Force yourself to go through that thought exercise. And then the opposite is like, if you're actually doing a really good job of like distributing and repurposing and coming up with new ideas and repackaging, then I would just say to look at like, are you being consistent and intentional on the news side? Or are you kind of just a little more haphazard and work with what I've got, which is a great thing to do, but maybe you need a little more discipline and rigor on, hey, next month let's just commit to like publishing 4 new things or whatever. Like, doesn't have to be this huge number or an elaborate plan, but like, let's just start to build some framework and consistency on that side and really build towards that. So that would be my initial things, kind of assess where you're at, which one of those camps you maybe fall in a little bit more, and how you can start to do more with what you have.
Yeah, I think if I had to leave people with one thing, it would be, if you're early on, or your tendency is to like want to do internet marketing, especially organically, and you sort of like hide behind the company, or I don't really know exactly the way, but like organic growth for me is very much a contact sport. Like, it requires you to like engage and read and learn and like interact with people and think about how you're gonna, because it's not just content either, right? Like you mentioned, there's like brand and product and all of that kind of going on, and so it's what's going to benefit your brand? Are there partnerships that will benefit your brand? And can you do outreach? And like, will it require content, or will it require social interaction to get associated with them? Like, there's just so much that's sort of like this, like, it's hard work. There's things to get done that aren't just like, I posted a thing, I put it out on the internet, and then now it lives on the internet organically or not. I think that has been one of my big learnings about organic growth, is like, it's very much like, you got to be involved and know what's going on and be a part of the zeitgeist and all that.
Yep, totally. It's another reason that we don't build strategies all at once for clients. You know, gotta get going, have a general idea of where you're going, and a few months worth of plan, but then, you know, do some additional research and planning every few months to stay relevant and stay on top of stuff. So yeah, I think that's all great, but totally agree on the relationship building stuff too, and engaging. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. You know, we this is something we've seen, had a lot more conversation with folks, and I think just in general, you know, the evolution of SEO, you know, is a bit more on folks' minds lately as well. And so I think this is what we've been doing, you know, at least for the last year, and kind of continuing on that path of where we're headed, and how we think about things to not be dependent purely on organic search and that one motion, but really kind of be able to drive that broader growth for companies. So with that, we will wrap up. Please like and subscribe this podcast. Listen on your favorite platforms. As I said before, you can check out and subscribe to our Substack newsletter.10speed.io. You can also find it via Substack. It's called Optimized by 10speed. So definitely check that out. And as Derek said, we will be, a few folks from our team will be at Inbound in September. So if you are planning to be there, want to meet up, chat, product-led growth, SaaS, you know, any of that good stuff, definitely hit us up on social, or find us another way, and we'll figure out how to make that happen. So with that, we will wrap up. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, thanks, Nate.